Okay, as we have already joined with so many participants, we can start now, and maybe our schedule has already touched. So hello, welcome everyone to our international webinar series. Today's webinar is titled Antimicrobial Resistance, the Miracle Within Miracle Drugs, highlighting the theme, everyone's problem requiring everyone's solution. Hosted by American Society for Microbiology Student Chapter of University of Rajshahi, Bangladesh. So we ASMRU family exactly believe in building up a scientific community that encourages curiosity, learning, and engagement with the world of microbiology. I am Tanjinarin Shuchuna, Vice President of ASMRU, Bangladesh. I will be your host for this session. Please accept my warmth welcome to this webinar. Our student chapter's advisors have already joined us. Dr. Imtiaz Hassan, Professor and Chairman of Department of Microbiology, University of Rajshahi, Bangladesh. Dr. Fuzlul Haq, Professor of Department of Geology, University of Rajshahi, Bangladesh. Thank you, sir, for your presence. In this phase, I would like to add my thanks to our enthusiast participants. We have got a huge response of more than 256 students from multiple disciplines from India, Pakistan, the Philippines, the USA, and Bangladesh. Dear participants, we have a big announcement for a post-webinar competition segment. So I will encourage you to continue the session with full passion. Keep your eyes on the chat box for the attendance form of the certificate. You need to fill it to receive the certificates. Now, let me honor and omit to introduce our today's speaker, Dr. Brenda Anne Wilson. Brenda Anne Wilson is currently professor at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign in the Department of Microbiology. She is an associate director of undergraduate education in the School of Molecular and Cellular Biology, College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, Department of Biomedical and Translational Sciences in the Charles Illinois College of Medicine, Department of Pathobiology in the College of Veterinary Medicine, and Senior Faculty Fellow in the Office of the Vice Chancellor for Research and Innovation. She is a Fellow of the American Academy of Microbiology, as well as a Distinguished Lecturer at American Society for Microbiology. She earned her BA degree in Biochemistry and German from Barnard College. She was a DAD Graduate Fellow in Biochemistry at Ludwig Maximilians Universität München, Germany. She earned her PhD degree in chemistry from Johns Hopkins University, and she was an NIH postdoctoral fellow in microbiology at Harvard Medical School. Her current research work focuses on the bacterial pathogenesis and bacterial toxins, development of therapeutic biologies, genomic technologies, and applications involving microbiomes and their roles in health and disease, climate change impact on health and microbiomes, and development of technologies and application for biosecurity. And her renowned books are Bacterial Pathogenesis, A Molecular Approach, and Revenge of Microbes, how bacterial resistance is undermining the antibiotic miracles. And our today's webinar titled is obviously inspired by her book Revenge of Microbes, Chapter 2. Now, I would like to extend my thanks to Dr. Brenda Anne Wilson for this amazing response for our today's webinar. Ma'am, your response is of courage for our chapter that will surely bloom out with aspiration to the young leaders. So, without any further delay, I would like to hand over today's webinar to our esteemed guest, Dr. Brenda Anne Wilson.
Thank you, Tanzia. It's so good to be here, and I'm so delighted and honored that you guys thought of me for this first inaugural series that you've started. So it's wonderful. I'm so glad so many folks are here and they're interested in this topic. And of course, that was one of the reasons why we wrote the book, is because we really want to get the word out that we need to start finding some solutions for the problem. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. I was very happy to see that there's a whole bunch of questions that came to me from that you sent me when they were applying for the webinar, and I hope that many of them are going to be answered during the talk, because I actually adjusted my slides just a little bit to help address some of those questions, and I hope that afterwards we'll have a chance to be able to actually discuss them. Oh, it's not really viewing very well here, sorry. Can you see that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. I'm going to use it this way then. So I'm going to start with basically saying that this is actually everyone's problem now, right? We've put it off for a very long time. It took a while to get everybody actually on board with the fact that we do have an antibiotic resistance problem, and it needs some solutions. And I'm hoping that at the end of the talk that we'll actually get you convinced that it's everyone's problem, that everyone has to contribute to a solution in some way. So first of all, I want to start with actually explaining a couple of terms here. So antimicrobials, also called antibiotics, they can come in a lot of different forms: antivirals, antifungals, antiparasitics, and antibacterials. These either stop or kill the microbes that they're targeting. The problem that we have right now is that almost all of the antibiotics that are currently on the market for commercial use are actually antibacterials. Very few are actually designed as antivirals, antifungals, or antiparasitics. And the reason for that is because antibiotics can be made safer, because we don't look a whole lot like bacteria, but a lot of the fungi and parasites have eukaryotic properties that actually cause some toxicity sometimes when those drugs are given to us. Antivirals, the same thing, because the viruses actually use our machinery to propagate. So it's very hard finding targets that will not harm us as well for these. So, and when we talk about antimicrobial resistance, well, if you're designing a drug against a bacteria, it's not going to work very well for the others, okay? Viruses, fungi, and parasites, there's very few drugs that can cross over those barriers. And you know, bacteria and other microbes can be actually inherently resistant to some drugs to start off with. But they can also develop the resistance, and that's making it so that the infections are much harder to treat. And that is really where antibiotic resistance comes from, and it's very, very hard to prevent, but we must be able to somehow contain it and control it. And that's part of the challenge that we have. So if you really want to think about it, well, how serious is this problem? And there's quite a few, folks that have been sounding alarm for quite some time. The WHO, had a very large report that was very thorough, talking about how the dangers if we allow this antibiotic resistance to continue, we may actually lose, our ability to fight things. The chief medical officer of the UK also said that modern medicine is going to be finished if this happens, and we'll see some examples of that. And really warning folks, there's not a minute to waste, but we got to start addressing this now. And on top of that, COVID, even though COVID was a viral infection, certainly had a huge impact on antibiotic resistance as well. And so we're dealing with the fallout from that, and there's an increasing spread of antibiotic resistance. And if you don't believe what people are saying, you can also look at the numbers. So the current numbers are the ones that we have the most close from are actually telling the story. Now, to start with, global deaths. This was before COVID, because of course COVID, shot things up way out of the ballpark here. But if you look at other types of diseases, cancers, heart disease, stroke, antibiotic resistance, and we're talking large numbers of deaths due to antibiotic resistance microbes, and it far exceeds even HIV and malaria in these cases. And in the United States, where I have more access to more accurate numbers, we have many cases as well as deaths that are associated with antibiotic resistance. And this is urgent because the list of microbes that are becoming on the list of urgent microbes that we need to deal with is getting larger and larger. And you can go to the CDC website and just see how large that actually is. In fact, the projections are that by 2050, we are going to be overwhelmed with the problem of antibiotic resistance. Right now, we're around 700,000 deaths per year globally. But the projection is that it's probably going to increase at the rate that we're currently going to about 10 million. And the cost that's associated with that is absolutely enormous. Okay, so we really do have to address this problem. And the problem, in order to be able to actually address it, we have to fully understand how it arises. And that is a two-step process. First of all, it's actually getting the resistance. And then the problem is its ability to rapidly spread. And what first happens is that, and it must be clear that the existence of the resistance is already in populations of microbes. So microbes mutate all the time. They respond to their environment. And there's always some of the microbes in any group that are going to have some resistance to whatever insult that they receive, including antibiotics. So if you apply to these bacteria, this group, those that get the antibiotic and are killed, they're going to go away. But there's going to be a few of them that actually are resistant or at least tolerant. And those are the ones that will survive and propagate. They will become dominant in that pool. And of course, if they are surviving, one of the key factors is that the ones that have the resistance are now, if they're pathogenic, they're going to not be able to be treated very well when you have an infection with them. And importantly, they can rapidly spread some of these resistances to other microbes. And so this spread, usually through genetic transfer of the genes that allow for that resistance to develop, can now spread to other bacteria that they come in contact with. And that, of course, leads to sometimes added resistances and in many cases, multiple types of resistances. So what contributes to this sort of development of the selection for these resistant microbes, and then the spread. Well, there's several key factors that do that. One is, for example, agricultural use of antibiotics. This is there's and coming from the point of view of the farmers and the industry that are working with these animals and crops. What you basically are looking for is they're using these antibiotics to promote growth, to make sure that the animals stay healthy. And if you think about how many animals can be in some of these feedlots, so for example, we have here in the United States cattle farms that have hundreds of thousands of animals. And if a few of them get sick, it can rapidly spread throughout the whole herd. And then it would be devastating for not only the meat industry, but also for the economics that are associated with that. And it will be a global impact because exports of meats and everything from those are going to stop because they're going to have to treat the animals, and it's going to be enormously difficult to do. And just to give you an example of this sort of impact that can happen, is that we actually published, I don't know, about 5 or 6 years ago, a genome study where we had an isolate of E. coli that had an enormous amount of antibiotic resistance associated with it. It was first isolated from an outbreak in farm birds, pheasants, and it had 32 known antibiotic resistance genes associated with it in its genome and in its 6 plasmids that it had. And in fact, one of the plasmids had 27 of those antibiotic resistance genes in it, which is enormous. And it speaks to how just transfer of that one plasmid could confer on other microbes that all that resistance. And in fact, when we tested for the resistances of the microbe, it was really not possible to treat it. And part of the reason why I kept developing those resistances is the farmers were kept trying to give different antibiotics to save the whole flock of birds, and it was not effective at all. So it can spread. And not only can it spread to the other animals, and usually it's through fecal transfer, but it can also get in the meat. It can get on the water runoffs from contaminated water as well as soil. And then certainly it's going to get there from preparation through contaminated surfaces. So this is a big concern. And release into the environment can happen through many, many different ways. And certainly sewage, runoffs, landfills, wastewater from households. Anytime that you take an antibiotic, not all of the antibiotic is going to be degraded in your body. In fact, many of the antibiotics are actually quite stable and can be defecated. So they can be released into the wastewater and can continue. And there's quite a few studies now that have shown that wastewater and from households and healthcare facilities actually do contaminate a lot of the waters that we have. And the effluents from pharmaceutical companies, from industrial fermentations, all of those contribute to this. And of course, when you also think about all of the fungicides and heavy metals and antibiotics that people give to their crops and to the animals, again, all of that is released into the environment. And if there are microbes in the environment, they're going to be exposed to these chemicals, which will allow them to actually get more and more resistances and keep them when they get them. And here's just, on an industrial scale, it can be enormous. We have, bird houses that have, 15 to 30,000 birds in them, a large number of birds. We have, pig farms that are very, very large. And again, all of that is going out into the environment. The waste from that is going there. We're depositing fungicides and pesticides on our crops. That's all going into the water and the soils also. And so it's spreading very easily into the environment. And all of this is being contributed to from just global impacts. Environmental impacts are also changing this, making so that the spread is much greater. And of course, it's going to affect everyone. And that's going to actually increase this going throughout the globally. And here's just an example. The dead zone that has been forming and is present in the Gulf of Mexico, primarily due to pollution of waterways that are entering it. So here's the United States. This is the Gulf of Mexico. You see here Mississippi and Louisiana down here. Texas is over here. Florida is right here. And you can see the Mississippi vast water system feeding into the Mississippi Valley and depositing the chemicals and runoffs from the water into the Gulf. That is causing enormous changes in the water. You can see here a picture of algal bloom. So this is, where algae and everything is growing. And of course, it's changing the microbial composition of the marine life that's all around here. And you can just see the impact that it can have. And this is also happening at other places around the world. It's not just happening here. I'm pointing to our country, my country, but it's happening everywhere. And we have to actually be more cognizant of this. We have to be mindful of all of the impact that this has. But it also and to bring this now a little bit more personally, we can also see that it's impacting us on a personal level too. So I want you to meet Amy Copeland. She's now Amy Copeland Mercer. But Amy, I became aware of Amy in 2012. And she actually made national news. She was all around because of what happened to her. So she was a graduate student, 24 years old. She went ziplining on a river in Georgia. And she fell and had a big cut from the rocks. Okay, lots of stitches here, you see. And a few days later, she was in the hospital, undergoing tremendous difficulties with severe sepsis, renal failure. She had 2 heart attacks. She had several amputations of her legs, so she lost all of one leg, half of the other, and all of her forearms as well. Amy is now doing well. She's actually a founder of the Amy Copeland Foundation to help others that suffer from these sort of disabilities. But what caused this? Well, at the time, very few folks had heard of this organism. It was called Aeromonas hydrophila. It's a toxin-producing, highly naturally antibiotic resistant environmental microbe. It is related to Pseudomonas. Pseudomonas also is inherently naturally resistant to antibiotics. And it's usually associated with diseases in freshwater fish and amphibians. But it is now increasingly Amy was not the first example, but she certainly became, in the press at the time because most folks hadn't heard of it. And it is now more and more drug resistance cases that are coming to light as a result of this. And so what happened? So how did this happen? So in Amy's case, they tried many rounds of antibiotics to help her. Of course, at first they used the first line of antibiotics, but when that didn't work, they tried a second line and a third line. And this is what happens when you have an antibiotic resistant strain, is you have to resort to second and third line drugs. And many of those are less effective. They actually have more toxicity associated with them. And if they are a drug of last resort, usually they are also very much more expensive. And so as a result, folks that have antibiotic resistant infections require much more time in the hospital, many more medical expenses, a lot of morbidities. You saw she lost her limbs as a result of this. And that is a very common occurrence in antibiotic resistance infections. And so, the treatment strategies and therapies are just not the same for a regular infection that you can get rid of in a few days or a week or so. And here's how this evolution, an example of the evolution of antibiotic resistance. So, and Staphylococcus is a primary example of this. Staphylococcus used to be early on, and when World War II, they released penicillin. It was a miracle drug because there were a lot of staph infections and wounds. And as soon as they started using it, it was like a miracle drug. Everybody started using it. It was so prevalent and so much that, by the end of the war, antibiotic resistance to penicillin was started to emerge. And then they switched to a different drug, which was a derivative of penicillin, which but soon methicillin resistance, and that's where MRSA comes from, methicillin resistant Staph aureus. Pretty much all strains now are resistant to methicillin. They were also using and switched to erythromycin and vancomycin at the time. Those were the drugs of last resort. You first tried, erythromycin, and when that didn't work, you went to the much more expensive vancomycin. But by the 80s, resistances to those also emerged. In the late 80s, early 90s, ciprofloxacin, Cipro, came on board. Well, very shortly in the 90s, resistance to that also. And by the 90s, methicillin and erythromycin resistances were way, way, way up there, not only from hospital infections, but also from community-acquired infections. And also, vancomycin then became the drug of choice. And of course, the more you use a drug, the more pressure it is to get antibiotic resistance to it. Even linezolid, when it was a brand new drug, very different chemical structure from other drugs. They were really hopeful for it. It got approved in 2000, and already in 2002, we saw resistances to it. And of course, around that time, vancomycin resistance now was very, very high, and particularly in strains from hospital-acquired infections. And now, linezolid and Cipro resistances are actually quite high. They're still very high. And the cost, what is the cost of this? Well, the cost is you have to, it takes enormously long time to get rid of it, to get better. This is actually one of my colleagues in my department actually came down with a staph infection in his thumb. And it took several months and 2 debridements, that is cutting off the dead tissue, to resolve the infection eventually. And of course, you can imagine that if it's in your body and it's going to other parts, it's going to cost a lot more, and the cost is quite large. We're running in the billions of dollars to handle this, a huge burden on our healthcare system. And then we have even the worst story. Okay, it's getting more and more worse. We are now having multi-drug resistance. So we don't remember, we started with penicillin, with the methicillin, the erythromycin, and vancomycin, and Cipro, and linezolid. Those are all different kinds of classes of drugs. Okay, and that's what we're talking about is multi-drug resistance, because you get resistance to one family of beta-lactams, which is the penicillins. So penicillin, methicillin, cephalosporin, those all belong to beta-lactams. And if you get resistance to one class, that means everyone in that class, all the drugs in that class are going to be also resistant to. And, now we have, where you have 3 classes or more of drugs that you have to give, and they're all resistant, which is a big problem. And then on top of that, we have what we call the superbugs. These superbugs are ones that have already inherent resistances to many drugs. And then they're developing and having more, okay? And so it's really, really a challenge. And, you know, the escape pathogens, these are based on the letters of these particular pathogens, which are both gram-positive and gram-negative. These are emerging now, hospital-acquired infections, and they're spreading like crazy throughout the world. And we're suffering from it tremendously. And just to give you an example, TB and multi-drug resistance TB and its impact it's actually quite troubling, because TB is inherently resistant to almost all the drugs that you would normally use for other bacterial infections. TB has a very special cell wall that is very hard to penetrate with normal antibiotics that could be treated with for gram-negatives and gram-positive bacteria. And so there are very few drugs that can normally work. The two ones that are most effective and most potent for it are isoniazid and rifampicin. These drugs now there's a high number of multi-drug resistances to that. So the many microbes going around right now are not being effective for them, and it's important then that the doctors have to move on to the next second line drugs to treat. So the increasing rate is about 1% a year. So we're seeing it very rapid, and of course, much more expensive, difficult to treat. People are, you know, in the hospital more, etc. And now we have also extensively drug resistant. So the XDRs, these are not only resistant to isoniazid and rifampicin, but also to some of the second line drugs. So each of these now basically is causing very limited treatment options. We have a few new drugs that have come on in the last 5 years or so, which are helping, but they're also very expensive and not everyone has access to them. And now we have an added factor is if you are HIV positive and you get TB, it's more or less a death sentence, okay? We can't treat it because HIV dampens your immune system, so you're not able to control it yourself. And that would have to happen if you have a resistant strain. So most healthy people can actually live with TB for a long time, as long as they're healthy, because your own immune system sequesters it away. And only if your immune system is weakened does it actually become reactivated. But with HIV, not the case. And in fact, about a third of all HIV-related deaths are actually caused because of infection with TB. And we're seeing a lot more of these cases. So even here in Illinois, we had in 2015 an XDR strain of TB. This individual actually traveled from India to O'Hare, where she was treated for it because she was coughing and it had activated. And they immediately transferred to NIH, where she was stabilized, and they're treating her and trying to keep her healthy. But recently we've also had quite a few multi-drug resistance cases. There's usually not a lot here in Illinois, but we do get every year we get a couple of hundred, and these are what we call new cases, and that require extensive treatment. And if you look at the cases that we have in the U.S., there's a reasonable number that's associated with it. So here's just a summary of the cost of it. Right now, these are fairly recent numbers from the CDC. 6 of the 18 most alarming antibiotic resistance threats that we have in the U.S. Are costing us about $5 billion a year. And each patient case episode can go a couple of thousand to up to $30,000 or more per episode of the patient. And it really extends the length of stay in the hospital, over a week or more. And the odds ratio of mortality is actually pretty high. It's not good. Those are poor rates. And you can see more about the special reports about this. And of course, the COVID made a huge impact on this as well, because of course it causes you to be more susceptible as well. And if you look at the list, these are bacteria, and I just want to point out that we do have antibiotic resistance problems in other organisms as well. I'm not emphasizing it here, but I do want to point out that we have one big problem that is coming out right now, and that is Candida, so fungal infections. So here in the States, and actually in the rest of the world as well, we now have a big problem with Candida auris. So it started, even as far back as 2019, we had a few cases in New York and in Illinois, in Chicago. But it was made nationally notifiable around that time. And now we have, tens of thousands of cases. And here's just the numbers that you can see for 2023 of where the hot spots are for it, and it's spreading. It's going wild. Problem with this is that it is common for hospitals, long care facilities, nursing homes, and the issue is that this yeast infection is a normal yeast infection. So what would normally be thrush or that you would have on your body, almost all of us have yeast on our bodies. And we have Candida, but it's usually Candida albicans, not Candida auris. The problem here is they visually look the same. And so you have to test to find out if it is auris or albicans. And that is causing a lot of issues and problems. So what are the consequences? This is a dire thing we're coming to. And what would happen if we actually now don't have antibiotics to use anymore? Infectious disease would be literally out of control. We would have to just rely entirely on our own health and our bodies to respond. We'd be going back, 100 or more years. The risk of modern day surgeries. So we couldn't just have simple cosmetic surgeries or any kind of surgery that we would have. We'd have to be outweighing the benefits. It would be hard to be able to say. They would have to be really risky. Cancer chemotherapy, organ transplants would not be possible. Anyone in these situations must be on antibiotic treatments to protect themselves, and that would not be possible anymore. So we would be in trouble there. And even minor injuries could rapidly become life-threatening. And certainly, if this happens and we don't have ways of control antibiotic-resistant microbes in agriculture, it would be devastating in terms of outbreaks and upset in terms of the food industry and our access to food. So the big question, why are we losing our first-line antibiotics, and why aren't we coming up with new ones, right? Well, a large part of it is coming from management problems. Some of it is because of inadequate treatment with appropriate drug, regimens. A lot of that is because we don't have good diagnostics and accurate diagnostics to rapidly predict susceptibility testing. And over-the-counter and over-prescription and unnecessary prescription, all of these are happening. And non-compliance. So, a patient gets a regimen and the doctor tells them to use it for 7 days, but they start feeling better and they're okay by day 3. They stop taking it. And so what that does is any bacteria that are there that might have had some tolerance or resistance now have the chance to actually continue and grow and spread. Lack of supervised treatment. This, I think, over-the-counter dispensing. Many countries, and I think Bangladesh actually is one of these, but lots of countries around the world allow for over-the-counter dispensing of antibiotics without a prescription. And this means that a lot of people are self-medicating. They're diagnosing themselves and oftentimes misdiagnosing because they're treating a viral infection with an antibiotic and it's not going to be very effective. And of course, we have, in some places, we have limited or interrupted drug supplies and substandard quality of the drugs that are being provided. There are some parts of the world where to get cheaper drugs, the drugs are out of their time or expiration date, and so they're not nearly as effective. And so if they're not as effective, then microbes that are resistant can continue to survive. The problem with some of this is, and so why are we misdiagnosing or misprescribing by doctors? And part of the problem is that we can't diagnose every time. So it's very costly to go in there and screen for antibiotic resistance. Antibiotic resistance panels are not cheap. And oftentimes what you do is a doctor goes in there and looks at your symptoms and then says, oh, what's a common cause for each of those symptoms? And then they go through with saying, yeah, it looks like these probably are bacteria, so yeah, we're going to give it antibiotics. Or, no, this is probably actually, it could be a bacteria or a virus, and it depends on what, I see or when I look. I may or may not actually give antibiotics. And then there are other cases where, oh no, this is definitely most commonly caused by a virus, and so therefore no antibiotics are given. That's a very general thing. Some of these, you're going to have exceptions to the rules, and that happens. And so this really does point to an urgent need to develop cost-effective, rapid point-of-care diagnostic tests. And it really would help in being able to steward these when we give these drugs and for what. It would be very helpful. And of course, we're not there yet. Why are we losing some of these? Well, part of it is that we're not getting more on the market. Companies are just bailing out. They're not finding that they get enough return on their investment. They spend billions of dollars to develop drugs, and if you're just giving a drug for a week, and it's not going to give them a whole lot of return if you're periodically giving back some of that money. And so what has happened clearly is that the number of companies that, in the beginning were doing antibiotics research and trying to find new drugs have dwindled tremendously. And now there's very few. And since 2017, we've only had 12 approved new drugs, but only 2 of them are actually new. The other 12 were just changed in formulation a little bit, but they aren't different. They're not different. So this is a dismal output of drugs that are new, that can be used to combat. And of course, Big Pharma is not happy with the enormous amount of dollars and time that is spent on trying to find and develop new drugs. So this is just a timeline. The cost right now to bring any drug to market, this includes other kinds of drugs besides antibiotics as well, it's about $1.5 billion. It's a lot. And it takes, a long time, 10 to 15 years. And lots of clinical trials that are very expensive, and lots of regulatory aspects that have to be overcome. It's just not worth it to the companies for their profit margin to be doing all of this. It's not effective. And so usually what happens is in the early stages, right up to about here, where the costs are still relatively low. The government does support many grants and stuff to industry and researchers to get to this point. But the government cannot, this is just too enormous for the government to actually subsidize too many or too much of this. They will do a little bit of this, but usually it's really on the industry to be doing that. So we have this problem. We have companies not being able to fulfill the needs that we have. And everybody is thinking, well, who's going to be responsible for fixing the problem? And if you go around asking, who should be fixing it? So there was a survey done about who fixes the problem of antibiotic resistance. Who's responsible? Who's going to do it? Almost everybody thought that drug and pharmaceutical companies should fix the problem. Okay. Many thought that doctors and healthcare providers should also be responsible. I was surprised at this. I thought more people would say the federal government needs to, but yeah, they're high up there. Patients, not as much, and agriculture and farming industry, not as much. Well, I would beg to differ with the opinions of all of these folks. I think that we can't rely on any one of these entities to solve the problem. It is a big problem. It is a global stakeholders that need to work together to solve the problem. Everyone in all different aspects have to come together to tackle this in a synergistic way. We have to work with each other. And in order to be able to do that, we have to actually start understanding each other and finding how we can actually work together, understand the points of view of each of the different stakeholders so that we can work out differences and work out where they're coming from so that we can actually approach it in a way that will work. And so, if you think about the healthcare professionals and ag industry and patients and consumers, we need to be able to monitor and keep track of and steward antibiotic usage a little bit better. I think that we're actually making a lot of strides in this in many countries and many places. The need is to improve understanding of the appropriate antibiotic usage and its stewardship. Okay, that is keeping track of it. So that's the need, and I think that this is we're getting better at that in some places. And basically what it is we need to have more research that actually allows for us to determine when is the best time to give certain antibiotics, when is it not suitable, and then educate the providers and the consumers on these practices. Have doctors explain to their patients why they're using a particular drug or not using it, and what is important to consider. And of course, in order for them to be able to explain it to their patients, they need to be able to understand it themselves. And so, not every drug is understood. There's, so many of them, it's very difficult for all healthcare providers to fully understand how they work. And so it's important to have that kind of educational, continuing education efforts. And the other thing too is preventive medicine. We need to focus more on preventive medicine, keeping people healthy to start with so that they will become more resilient and more resistant to infection. And this, we don't spend enough time promoting good health and good hygiene, clean water. Clean water can make an enormous difference, and vaccinations and lifestyles, etc. And so being able to have incentives for this is actually important, and it's important to realize. Education is critical. We need to understand how can we build more healthy environments so that we can be healthy, so that we can be more resilient to anything that comes along. And that's really where it's important that we work together education to empower stakeholders to make good decisions, to understand the importance of the microbes and in the environment, in the ecosystems, and how they impact us and our environment, helping to get healthy food, healthy systems, being able to be more resilient, helping communities, and important to support clinical partners for continuing education of medical and graduate students and educators, and even those who are already practicing clinicians, help those to understand how best to deal with antibiotic resistance. And, again, just talking about this is a One Health problem, okay? It means it goes everywhere from, the environment where we're talking about microbes that are in the soil or on the plants. We're talking about healthy plants, healthy insects. We don't want to have bad insects. Insects actually can transmit, microbes from one place to another, and we want to make sure those microbes that are being transmitted aren't transmitting disease organisms. And then, of course, the food that and making sure that they're healthy, that we stay healthy. And if we stay healthy, it will impact the types of diseases that we might get. And so that it will mitigate many of the symptoms and many of the problems that are associated with some of the diseases that we have. And of course, academia and industry scientists, all of you, many of you, I am assuming, are interested in being going into research or at least being involved in this sort of thing. There are a lot of new approaches that are on the horizon and actually already in place. So many traditional methods are now finding new twists to how they can be accomplished, to get new antibiotics, ones that are different, that are going to be targeted very specifically or very, for particular purposes. And all of these strategies that are listed here, many of these approaches are now being accelerated and streamlined by generative artificial intelligence algorithms and approaches. Bioinformatics and high throughput technologies are really transforming how all of these efforts are going to go in. And I anticipate that instead of having just, two new antibiotics, in 10 years, that we're going to have more as a result of that, because the field is ready to really blossom in this regard. And in addition to that, instead of just having new drugs, new antibiotics, or new formulations, we're going to be able to also have new approaches, things that don't require actual drugs, but rather new strategies. So, for example, using healthy microbiomes, prebiotics, probiotics, those types of approaches where we are using our own gut microbes to help keep us healthy and keep the pathogens away. Phage therapy, we are already seeing a lot of success in this. These are viruses that attack bacteria, and we can have very specific ones that specifically target a particular bacterium. This is actually already in place in some cases for removing listeria from meats and things like that. We can also do this for wounds, and so surface applications of phage for staph and I think even during the anthrax episodes we had against anthrax. So these are our approaches. Right now, it's still a little challenging to do it in vivo, so injection of it. Although there have been a couple of very famous cases that have been in the news about successes in this arena, it is very expensive. So this is not that feasible yet for everybody. Vaccines, passive immunotherapies are also, now that we know a lot more about our immune system and how it works, we can get much more effective vaccines and passive immunization strategies. Point of care diagnostics, I am really hopeful that this is going to really take off, because being able to know exactly what the resistances are of the microbes that a patient has at that time is really going to allow for better stewardship and much better control of the infections. And then there are some other ones that are being explored, but are nowhere near clinical trials or anything like that right now. But there's some other additional ways to actually help with all of this. And in addition to this, as a result, we also have a lot of technologies and bioinformatics and things that are helping with many of these approaches. Policy makers, government agencies. I think that this is where we actually have a great need. All of us who are scientists really need to participate in this. We need to communicate with non-scientists. We need to coordinate and establish regulatory guidelines. We have to help them find a way of doing this so that we're going to have a better understanding of the urgency and the scale of the antibiotic resistance situation that we have right now. The need to control the spread and to slow the depletion of our antibiotics. So, we're getting a few in, but we're getting an awful lot more resistances out, and that's a problem. And so we need to build and strengthen partnerships with everyone who's a stakeholder, and they have to be actually getting together and helping each other to understand and understanding each other's points of views. So academic researchers, here's your opportunity to actually help influence this by talking to your local policymakers, talk to your local community leaders so that they can actually help understand this and work to improve it. Another area where there's a great need, and I don't see any really, cheap, feasible solutions yet. All of the solutions that are coming out are pretty expensive, very big price tags, but this is in play. We have a couple of strategies that are right now out there that people are trying to implement. So this is where we're trying to find ways to incentivize pharmaceutical industry to develop antibiotics. The problem is that they put up an awful lot of upfront money to invest in the research and development of the drug before it gets on the market. And their ability to recover the cost of this effort over here is entirely, right now, entirely hinged on the cost recovery from sales. We have to break this connection. We have to be able to detach it. So some way we have, and I think that the only places that we actually have the means to do this is through government sponsorship and private investor sponsorship, because the dollars that are involved in here are huge. And there has to be new business models that somehow allow for this to happen. We have right now 2 bills in the United States, and I think that there's some similar ones that are across the world. In fact, the ones that we have that have been introduced into our Congress legislature actually were also already in play and have been funded by many other countries around the world. And the one was introduced in 2023. It was called the Pasteur Act. And this was basically to authorize $6 billion in appropriations to be able to incentivize the industry to come up with a few antibiotics in the end, okay? So if they develop a couple of antibiotics within a period of time, they'll get their money. And of course, that price tag is very hard to swallow for a lot of legislatures. Congressmen and people who are representing the population aren't convinced that this is an urgent need, and so other things take priority. And so right now, it's been introduced into the legislature at least 3 times, even and it's still pending in this year. So how that will pan out, it's not clear. And then the Superbugs Act, which was introduced in, I guess, also in 2023 and 24, that one also basically, I think the acronym stood for Saving Us from Pandemic Era Resistance by Building a Unified Global Strategy. It's designed to, again, build partnerships around the globe, and it's now stuck in committees in Congress, and it's not it hasn't passed yet, so we don't know where that stands. Of course, here is where you can influence your Congress people and stuff, or you can convince your governments to support things along these lays, but it's very, very challenging, and how that will work and pan out is not very clear. There is quite a few countries that are participating and trying to do this, and you can get a really good feel for it. So this website right here, it's active. You can go to it. It's as up to date as they can make it. There's several organizations, the World Health Organization, the World Organization for Animal Health and Food and Agriculture, and these of the United Nations. These folks are bringing up as much data as possible that you can go in and you can actually find what the status is of each of the countries. You can click on them and you can find out what year. You can click what year you're going to look at. I don't think it's this year is not there yet, but if you go in there, you can see what year you want to look at, where the status was of a particular question. For example, I pulled up the United States for the question of legislation and or regulations to prevent contamination of the environment with antimicrobials. And then the answer that you might get will be the choices listed down here, and you can see what the status of that question is and where that country stands with regard to that. And you can say, what region and where you want to do this. You can get a lot of information, and it's a good monitoring system for figuring out where things are around the world. And of course, the battle continues. All of these organizations and societies are all working extremely hard against antibiotic resistance. We have a little bit of a pause on this one. In the United States, our Presidential Advisory Council on Combating Antibiotic-Resistant Bacteria, the meeting in January was canceled, and we haven't heard anything yet, but we'll see where that goes. But all of these others are still in play. All of them are very devoted to this. And one of the things that they are now struggling with, and we as scientists also are struggling with, is reestablishing trust in these institutions. So right now, the general public is not very welcoming. And we need to actually have more transparency. We need to have education and advocacy for all of the efforts that these organizations are doing to help us and to fight this growing urgent problem. So take home, everyone's a stakeholder against this fight and its spread. It's a One Health problem, and solutions require buy-in from everybody. If you don't have the money, then you need to at least have the moral support. You need to actually get out there and vocally support it. No individual can solve the problem alone. The industry is not going to be able to do it. Pharmaceuticals can't do it on their own. They need to have support from every angle. A multi-pronged approach is very important. Development of some of these alternative strategies is going to be crucial, and there needs to be support for that, and not only verbal support. So it turns out that nothing's going to get done if you don't also support financially these efforts. And so having a dialogue with folks, convincing them that this is an important endeavor is going to be critical. And of course, your voice is important, and your thoughts are also very important in this. And And a lot of a lot of these topics and some of the backgrounds are actually explained a little bit more in my book. So I encourage you to feel free to look at it and get some of it. We cover about how antibiotics work and how some of the resistances against them emerge. But we also talk a little bit about the stakeholders and some of the strategies that are being approached as well. So with that, I want to thank all of you. This is truly an honor, and it's great. I love it. And I am open to questions. I hope that many of the questions that were posted before have been answered, but I'm still willing to take on additional ones. I'm going to stop sharing with that.
Thank you so much,
Right.
Dr. Brenda, for this informative session. Obviously, this will be a footprint of inspiration for our chapter and surely unlocking the quest of knowledge of science from the esteemed guest as like you. We're also trying to do our part in making the general public awareness of AMR in our society. We have done several school awareness programs to make the root of the society, that is the actually high school students, to aware them about this problem, and we look forward to spreading this awareness among the root level people.
I
And
think it's
there is
wonderful
a
what you're doing. I think it's wonderful, and this is a good start. So this is great that you've organized this, and there's it's such a good response. I think it's
we have
wonderful.
already planned for making awareness among the college students, and obviously we are making awareness among the university students also. So there is a little bit announcement for the participants. Please check out the chat box for attendance form for certification. And I'm sure most of the participants are already satisfied with the answers of their questions during the session. So now we will take some live questions as our speaker already announced it. So I would like to request our volunteers to show the questions on the screen. We have got few questions, ma'am, during the session through the chat
Great.
box.
Okay. All right.
And
Okay.
we have
So,
already gathered them. And here is the questions you can see. Our first question was, if we stop using antibiotics in the livestock feed, which alternative therapy, phages, probiotic, vaccines, or plant-based antimicrobials is the most practical and sustainable for farm use?
oh, that's a loaded question. Actually, I think that there's a couple of strategies that probably would be better to implement to start with. Of course, talking about hygiene is one of the things that needs to be done. Making sure that the introduction of the microbes is controlled. Now, that's very hard to do because right now the transport of animals from one place to another is actually quite rapid, and there's a lot of it. So that movement is very hard to control. But if you can actually track the animals, and there are some folks that are doing this right now. They're putting chips in the animals. They're tracking them to be able to follow where they're going and how rapidly they're going and what their health is. And part of that allows for, if there is an outbreak in one place, then if the animals from that one place have moved to another place, they can immediately track where it's gone and actually put a quarantine out so that they can contain them. So containment, I think right now is the easiest and cheapest way to control in the agricultural arena. I think that vaccination is a very difficult thing to implement for agriculture. So, for example, FMD, so the foot and mouth disease, that is a very big problem in say cattle and other ruminants and even pigs. But when you have that, when you have it, the problem is that you immediately go on the alert for being able to not, or I should say, not being able to import or export your food, right? So exporting, your cattle, there's three stages. You either are green and good to go, you can export, or you're in the intermediate stage, and you have to wait for a period of time before you can export your animals, while the disease or whatever is mitigated, and until you're disease free, and then and if you are vaccinating, that period of time is much longer. So you can't, because vaccination doesn't get rid of the microbe. It prevents the disease in the animals that get vaccinated. But if those animals that are vaccinated are then exported elsewhere, and the animals at the other location are not vaccinated, you can transmit disease. So they don't want that happening. So you're banned from being able to export. That's a problem. And so oftentimes that's not the direction to go. Keeping probiotics might be a solution. So probiotics, being able to, and I would say instead of probiotics, I would say prebiotics. Prebiotics is where you promote the growth of the healthy microbes. Probiotics is introducing the healthy microbes, and sometimes that can not necessarily lead to success. But it depends on the situation. So you could probably introduce things. If you have very specific phage against the pathogenic microbe and it works, then that would actually be not a bad solution. And plant-based antimicrobials, well, many of the antimicrobials that we have are, we do have some that are plant-based, that are coming from plants. That isn't necessarily, again, the solution, because you can get resistances to those as well. And I would say that really the best is just control and monitoring and being able to contain and making sure that it's profitable. And believe me, many of the companies tried this. They tried to get rid of having to give antibiotic treatments to their animals, and they had to renege on that promise. So many of them, they had promised that they would not do it, and then a year or two later, they had to say, "Sorry, I can't survive without doing it." So we have to find probably some alternative strategies in that arena. Yeah. So again, it would be nice if we had some insights from folks that had some good ideas on that. And the industry's struggling with that. It really is. And we have to also be mindful of many of the drugs that are being used in the animals are similar to drugs that are used in humans. So the problem there is that you think that, oh, it's called something else, it's not the same thing. Well, that's not necessarily true, because if you get resistance to that drug because the drug that we actually use in humans has a similar structure, that resistance can build in humans as well. And this was, we found this out with some of the drugs that originally were being given to animals, and I talk a little bit about that in the book, so there's more of that there.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting solution, using prebiotics. So we can go to the next question. If we engineer human or animal microbiomes to resist colonization of resistance pathogen, how do we prevent unintended ecological consequences, such as destabilizing native microbial networks or giving rise to new virulent strains?
Yeah, so I think that the solution here is not to necessarily engineer our microbiomes, but rather build a healthy community of your microbiome. So promoting the ones that you have health. I mean, if you have a healthy microbiome, folks that have healthy microbiomes don't get sick as easy because they actually are able to prevent the pathogens from colonizing in the gut. Doesn't mean the pathogens aren't there or that they pass through, but the healthy microbiome prevents adherence of the pathogen to your gut lining because the healthy microbes are already there. They're occupying that space. They also prevent, they're already, combating with the microbes that are coming in. The other thing that you probably want to realize is that many of the healthy microbes that you have in your body are anaerobes or facultative anaerobes. So they prefer environments that don't have oxygen. Pathogens, on the other hand, many, or most of them are they require oxygen. So when they're outside, they're not going to. So if you engineer the anaerobes to be the ones that are resisting the pathogens, they're not going to survive outside very well. So that's one strategy that a few folks are thinking about. So for and we see some of this when we look at Clostridial disease. So C. difficile, the Clostridium difficile infections. Those basically come about because you get fed antibiotics, and then your normal Clostridia that are in your gut go away. And then whatever Clostridia difficile organisms that are there, they take over and they grow. And they are toxic because they have lots of toxins associated with them. And that causes the disease. And so it's because you've perturbed your microbiome and you're not protecting yourself against them as much. So it's complicated. And I think that what we need to do is we need to have individualized precision medicine in these cases. Everybody doesn't behave the same to probiotics and to whatever they have. I mean, for example, there was a big phase of getting lactobacillus acidophilus in yogurt, and you take yogurt, and that would help introduce the new, a good microbe into your gut. Well, 70% of people, it works beautifully for them. But if you're the 30% that it doesn't work, oh my gosh, it's a lot of problems. And of course, I happen to be one of those. I took the yogurt. My daughter was fine. She did. We were, the human experiment. We were, being scientists here, and we tried it out. And my daughter was fine, and it was great for her. Me, I had to go to a gastroenterologist and get treated for it because it doesn't work with everyone. And so we have to tailor our microbiomes. We have to tailor our medicine to individuals. Now, is that a cheap endeavor? No, it's not cheap. Not everyone can do that. And we have an awful lot of folks who couldn't afford to do that, okay? So that's not going to be necessarily always the solution. I would say that if you can just build for each individual a healthy microbiome for that individual, eat healthy, exercise, be well, clean water. Clean water. So many of the microbes that are causing diseases, and some of the worst diseases are, diarrheal type diseases. It's all waterborne. And if we can clean up the water and we can, get rid of that contamination aspect of it, it will go a long ways. It will also go a long ways by being able to just, be more healthy when we're eating and things. So I think that's the better approach rather than totally engineering, because you add something that's engineered, you don't necessarily know what the outcome is, and you're going to have to do a lot of research and experiments with that.
Ma'am, our next question is about resensitization strategies and weakening the resistance process. So the question is, Could bacterial resensitization strategies, such as manipulating environmental factor to weaken resistance, followed by targeted antibiotic use, represent a sustainable and practical solution for managing antimicrobial resistance in farm settings?
Well, certainly, that does make it, environment is going to make a difference on which microbes are able to survive in that environment. So if you, so the in the environment, the pH really is a big factor but the environmental microbes, they have a tendency to actually be much more hardy than ones that we have in our bodies. I don't know that how successful that would be in terms of being able to counter or make the microbe that is being introduced into you that is pathogenic, that's a problem, is going to actually allow you to target it with another antibiotic that will make it, more susceptible. There are augmentation strategies, though. So many of the drugs that we have are augmenters. So in fact, Augmentin, which is one of the drugs that is often used, is a beta-lactam antibiotic plus an inhibitor of the beta-lactamase. So the resistance is caused by an enzyme that cleaves the beta-lactam structure in the antibiotic. And that basically inactivates the antibiotic. But if you have, in addition to the antibiotic, an inhibitor that blocks that enzyme, then you can just use the regular antibiotic because that inhibitor is now killing the thing that's usually destroying it. So it allows it to work. That kind of augmentation, I think, is really, really beneficial. You can get by with a lot less antibiotic. You can get by with a lot shorter period of time because you're basically killing it off earlier and sooner. And I think that having these kinds of augmentation strategies where you're actually using even, and especially if you're using a suicide substrate like inhibitor, which basically once it hits the enzyme, it totally inactivates it so it can't continue at all. I think that's even more strong. And they do have that. They have been, each of the different generations of beta-lactam antibiotics have with it now a augmenter that they've also developed for it. So there are things like that. I think one of the things that I'm very excited about right now that they haven't really targeted very much for bacteria yet. I think that they're using it for mycobacteria, but they're now targeting what they call PROTACs. So these are protein degradation molecules that target a specific protein for ubiquitination or for some other degradation by the host that it's in, whatever it gets into, so a bacterial cell or a eukaryotic cell, for degradation by that cell. And there's now some success that they've been able to actually get these small molecule, what they call back PROTACs, into mycobacteria that then will kill the mycobacteria because it targets the target protein that's inside the mycobacteria for degradation. And that basically destroys the bacteria. So there's new strategies out there. And I think that probably is where the augmentation and new formulations is going to improve some of our approaches.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for these amazing answers. We will take 2 more questions. Our next question is, how alternative immunotherapies positioned within AMR mitigation strategies in livestock to achieve both practical farm adoption, and long-term sustainability?
The only way that can happen is with money, unfortunately. Any immunotherapy treatment is expensive. And to tell you the truth, right now, vaccinations are expensive, and many farmers don't even want to do that because it's expensive. So positioning that sort of thing for in livestock, I am not sure that that would be really the most viable approach. It might be so if you're using it for, say, the breed, the breeders, the ones that that they don't want to get sick, the ones that are the prized animals. I am really worried that that would not be something that would be palatable to most farmers. I would be worried about that.
Yeah, that will be a critical step for the farmers. Our next question is, how can antimicrobial stewardship programs be implemented in different healthcare settings? And this will be our last question.
Okay, and if anybody has additional ones, whatever's in the chat, you can forward it to me, and I'll respond. So antimicrobial stewardship programs have to be tailored to the individual healthcare setting. Not all of them operate the same way. Don't have the same scale. And part of the problem with that is, of course, cost. Because if you have a stewardship program, you have to have an infectious disease monitor person, someone that goes around and regulates and, enforcer, somebody that goes around and makes sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. That requires money, and it's an investment. How do you get people to be incentivized to do that? Well, I think that the solution to that is actually making it so that the insurance companies get involved on this. So insurance companies have to dole out an awful lot of money when there are these kinds of diseases around. And it is not in their best interest to have certain facilities that are costing them a lot of money. So they have the power to actually sort of enforce or make sure that each of the healthcare settings have what they need to control the infections that they have. So that's one avenue that can be done, is to have a little bit more influence with the insurance companies. The other is to actually have a template that is available for the different scenarios. A large metropolitan area, a small rural clinic. You got to have different policies for each of the different settings. And if you can have them uniform so that like a template that they can use, they can then take that template and tailor it to their own needs. And then you do have to have somebody that's willing to go around and monitor it and check it. And that's going to have to be, I think you got to convince the regulatory agencies, the government folks, to actually assist with that sort of thing. And it has to be a priority. You got to have folks feeling that this is a priority that needs to be supported. And of course, that involves convincing your policymakers, your government officials, your community leaders that we want to do something about this, and we would like to see this happen. Now, I know that here in the States, for the most part, we have a lot of success in this area. Not all places, but it's actually pretty good in many, many, many places. But I know that elsewhere they can't afford it. And so how to do that, I think that it can be something that maybe societies or organizations can assist with, that might be somewhere where some of these foundations that have money that can actually assist with setting up some of these programs in places that are more economically challenged. Maybe that might be one way to go about it. But I would hope that if we could get more support, if you can get more stakeholder buy-in, you're going to be able to get this better implemented.
Thank you, Brenda, for this beautiful answer. Yeah, we are seeing there is a lot of challenges, but surely a strategic way and mass awareness can be the light toward AMR resistance.
Yeah. Well,
And
certainly education helps, right? And you're
yeah,
starting with that right here. So I think that that's a wonderful start and it's a really good step forward on hopefully, it will incentivize folks at least emotionally and, to be, wanting to assist and wanting to be part of this. And you have to realize that it does take a global community and everyone, you may not have yourself the power to do everything, but every little bit helps. And that's where a community coming in and together to address these issues. I don't have the solution to everything myself. I have heard some options. I've heard some suggestions from folks. I don't know actually even myself how many of those will actually be practical to implement. But it's exciting to hear the ideas and to hash them out. And who knows, new innovations can happen. And I think that this is a good start because we have a lot of young folks who are excited about this and are interested in this, and you certainly got a good crowd here that are participating in this. And so I think that this is a really great, huge leap forward.
yeah, ma'am. And we're also planning for expanding our awareness program, specifically among the local people. Raising awareness among local people is much difficult because they don't know science, they don't know logic, and they don't have education, proper education. So we are launching a program in a few days, and it is about raising awareness among the local people. And our seminar segment was about raising awareness among the school goers or university goers, among the students. And we are working that so that these participants can raise awareness among their community. And I guess they will do so. And I will
It's
again
great.
give you, yeah, I will again
It
give
is
you,
really good. Yes, yes.
yeah,
And the more you do it, I think that the more the interactions will happen. And I mean, one strategy that some of the students here are taking is to reach out to their Congress people, to their community leaders, and invite them to participate in some of these programs and some of these seminars and things. Sometimes it helps. I think there's some students who are developing their own little public service announcement, little video clips that they post, on particular topics. So either, and and then they show them on TikTok and places like that, So it's anything along those lines actually makes a difference. So it's
yeah,
good.
if they do so, it can be a good way for raising awareness. And people will love this, and we are also hoping that they will do so. And we are specifically focusing on the local people, awareness, making awareness among the local people, because we think this is the difficult part of raising awareness about AMR. And I think in the developing country, most of the people, local people, common people, rural people, they exactly don't know what is AMR. But AMR is now a big question, a big challenge to the health. And so we are working on it. I guess we can hope for the best. Here I can,
All
yeah,
you can do is try, right?
yeah,
And
we can
I
make a
think
try.
if everyone tries and everyone convinces maybe 2 more people or 3 more people, it will snowball. It will happen. It's good.
Yeah, then it can be the everyone's problem and everyone's solution. If we can make this awareness, we can
Exactly.
be the way of awareness, or we can be the one who can award the another 10 people. So that can be the strategy.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
In
Wonderful.
in this phase, ma'am, I would like to extend my thanks and gratitude to you for your time and consideration.
And
Uh,
thank you all for being
you
great
know,
audience, great questions. And I wish you all the best. It's great.
ma'am, you're very much popular among our committee members, and our committee members was so much excited when they learned that you were making a webinar with us, and they have made a little gift for you. Gift,
Oh,
token of love. Maybe it will be the token of love, a gift, emotion, a token of emotion from our chapter. And I would like to request our volunteers to show it on the screen. They were very much excited, and they give their time and basically their dedications and their emotions, and they give this output.
oh,
So here
isn't
is
that
a token of love for
beautiful?
you.
Awesome. Oh, that's great. Love
They
it.
gathered messages from our committee members for you, and I will send you the scanned version of this
Oh,
card
that would be
very
wonderful.
soon.
Thank you. I will post it. I will post it this
Okay,
morning.
ma'am, I will
Thank
I
you.
will send you through the email. And now there is a little bit about our announcement. Uh, you know, um, we have already announced that there will be a post-webinar competition segment, and we will launch it very soon. And the competition will be on report writing and about our today's webinar, what we learned about our today's webinar, so that we can express and we can spread our knowledges from our learning from today's webinar. So we will launch very soon a competition segment. So we will request you all to stay connected to our WhatsApp group, Facebook, and LinkedIn platform. And I would like to thank again to our honorable speaker, Dr. Brenda, and obviously to our advisors, and most especially to our volunteers who worked hard to make this event a success and making this huge gathering, and making the spread of awareness. So here I am declaring the official end of the webinar segment here, and we will request you all to stay connected with us for more, for making more fun, for making more awareness, or for making more informative or sharing more informative things to us. So here I am declaring the official end of the webinar segment. You can leave the Zoom meeting. Thank you, everyone. And obviously, thank you, ma'am. And we will mail you very soon